Have you ever noticed patterns repeating in your relationships? Patterns you wish you could break, but somehow keep showing up for? Maybe it's a fear of abandonment, difficulty trusting, or always giving too much love, getting little in return. What if I told you that many of these patterns aren't just your choices? They're inherited from your family, passed down through generations. Today, I'm going to show you how to identify these ancestral and generational love wounds, heal them, and rewrite your story so you can finally experience the love and connection you deserve. Stay tuned. We're going to dig in. Welcome to the Secret Formula of Femininity for women who want to live a more feminine, fun, and fabulous life. I'm Dr. Nicole Montero, your host on this weekly journey to unlocking your inner radiance, nurturing fulfilling relationships, and becoming the best version of yourself. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Nicole, your host and guide on this journey to tapping into your feminine essence. I want to start today's episode with a story about a woman who was in one of my coaching programs. I'm just going to call her Maya. Maya came to me exhausted from a string of relationships that left her feeling unseen and unappreciated. She kept attracting partners who mirrored the same emotional distance that she had with her father growing up. Through our work together in the group coaching sessions, we uncovered that her father had been emotionally unavailable because he, in turn, had grown up in a home where love was conditional. This wasn't just about Maya's choices, it was a generational pattern. By identifying this pattern, acknowledging it, and intentionally choosing different behaviors, Maya was able to shift how she showed up in love, and she was able to create a relationship where she felt nurtured, seen, and safe. That is what today's episode is about. Taking those invisible wounds, rewriting them into love, joy, and connection. Let's talk a little bit about ancestral and generational love wounds. There's a lot of research in the field called epigenetics. One big scholar is Dr. Rachel Yehuda, and it shows that trauma can impact future generations not only emotionally but biologically. Brene Brown, Mark Wolin, and researchers like Esther Perel highlight that family relational patterns shape adult attachment and how we approach love. So it's not always about you chose bad, but it's what you inherited. Ancestral love wounds are emotional patterns, their beliefs, or trauma passed down through generations. Things that you may not have even known about your family are impacting the decisions and the relationships that you have now. That's why I always work with women to let go of the shame around their failed relationships because it only leads to them recreating the cycle or reinforcing the cycle. So, what are some common examples of these ancestral and generational love patterns? One is conditional love. That's the whole feeling and verbalization of, I'll love you if. It's conditional, it's transactional. If you do this, that is the only way you'll get my love. Another is fear of abandonment or rejection. And sometimes that goes back 2, 3, or more generations. If you see a pattern of divorce, abandonment, leaving relationships, that could be affecting you today. Another is difficulty expressing vulnerability or intimacy. I see this a lot with women, and they don't know where it's coming from because oftentimes they have the desire to do this, but it was never modeled. And actually, the fear and difficulty is what is passed down through the maternal side often, and a lot of times the paternal side as well. So, how could they be showing up in your life and relationships right now? One is repeating unhealthy relationship dynamics. You find yourself in the same relationships over and over and over, despite how unfulfilling and even unhealthy you recognize that they are. Another is difficulty trusting or feeling worthy of love. So you choose the bottom of the barrel because that's all you feel worthy of, or you feel like, at least I know what I'm getting. I don't have to go out on a limb and trust. You go for the bottom because that's what you feel you deserve. Another is being the fixer. So you overcompensate by trying to fix others. You choose projects, you choose men who are not going to be able to provide in any kind of emotional or other way for you. So, one of the things you can start doing is noticing in your own relationships What are the patterns? Are there any repeated behaviors or triggers that feel out of proportion? Often, these are the clues to generational wounds. And there's a lot of research into how to heal these things. One of my favorite books on trauma is Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, because it's not just a generational pattern. Sometimes it's things that are stored in our body and how we cope and respond. So, unresolved family trauma can manifest, of course, physically, but also emotionally and in our relationship patterns. Who we choose, who we don't choose, the green flags are healthy people that we ignore and pass over as we're jumping to find the unhealthy people that feel familiar. Secure attachment is learned, but insecure attachment from family patterns can be healed through intentional practices. So, if you were in a situation where you did not learn or healthy attachment was not modeled for you, even as an adult, you can reverse course and correct those patterns. One of the important strategies, the most important, is reflective journaling. When you write letters to your ancestors, those who came before you, acknowledging your pain as well as theirs, you start to heal. You start to forgive and you start to be able to chart a new pattern and break that generational curse, as people say. Another is inner child work. This is where you start to connect with the younger versions of yourself who experienced unmet love. And those are the versions of you that show up currently, even though you're a fully grown woman. When you connect with her, when you comfort her, and you give her empathy, you can release yourself from her so you can move on to healthier relationships. Another really important one is boundary setting. Usually, difficulty with boundaries comes with these unhealthy family relationship patterns. You have to learn to protect your emotional space and redefine what love looks like for you. It doesn't have to always look like the other women in your family. For example, I was reading an article about the influencer Supersense. She's a beauty influencer, and she talked about her relationships. I think she had been with someone, they broke up, she got engaged quickly, that ended, and she got into another relationship. And she talked about how that was what she saw growing up. Women would just move on. And, there's a case to be made with like, you have to live your life. But what happens is when you move on too quickly without taking time to heal, to reflect, to see if the next person that's a rebound is just like the previous person, then you stack up a string of unhealthy relationships. And that is what's modeled to the younger girls around you. So everyone begins to think it's normal to just jump from this person to that person without reflecting, without healing. And some would say without learning to take accountability for the choices that you are making, or take accountability for how you're living out and playing out family patterns. And because the body does keep the score, things like somatic work and mindfulness are key. So this could be meditation, breath work, and guided visualization to help you ground yourself and release the inherited trauma. You do that by telling yourself that this is your body, you can control it, you can relax it, you can regulate it. And these practices are not just for women who are looking for a relationship. I've worked with a number of women who are currently in relationships or married, and they began to notice the way that unhealthy family patterns were showing up for them. And we talked about the strategies to help them get out of being in that unavailable space. Sometimes you can be in a relationship, but still be emotionally unavailable. And so we were able to work through how to learn to be more emotionally intimate, more vulnerable, and also be able to feel good about themselves. Because I don't care whether you're in a relationship or not, if you're not feeling worthy of love, it's not going to show up in a healthy way in your relationship. I've worked with other women who were able to stop attracting unavailable projects. Those men that seem to have potential, but they have a pattern of screwing things up. You need to watch my video on the four types of men to avoid. But one is the emotionally unavailable man, of course, the narcissist, but also the emotional warrior. That is the man who seems very emotionally in tune, and he connects to your trauma wounds. So you all end up trauma bonding, but he never actually builds anything or does anything to show that he feels worthy. So it's this weird way that you all create a codependency. But here's the good news, you can actually rewrite your family story so the next generations will be looking at how you did things. Some important steps to take are to identify the pattern. Awareness is key. So when you notice things like the emotional triggers you have, the family beliefs, things that you hear the people talking about at the dinner table, especially the women, and repeated dynamics in relationships. Are there a lot of divorces? Are there a lot of children spread out from different relationships that didn't last? Look at those patterns, recognize them, and be able to identify them. And the next step is to acknowledge and accept. You have to understand that these patterns are not your fault, they were learned. So there's a way you can accept, acknowledge what's yours, but also take accountability for saying no more. And you get to choose differently when you consciously adopt new behaviors in your relationships, whether you're in one or not, learning to communicate your needs, learning to have boundaries, learning to be able to open up. These are all ways that you show that you're in your feminine energy, you're breaking the pattern, and you're creating a new, healthier way, not only to be with others, but also just to be with yourself. An example would be practicing vulnerability in the midst of a conflict instead of shutting down. One pattern that people play out a lot is avoiding conflict. So just going along with things, never speaking up until it becomes a whole built up resentment, or just becoming hard and fleeing. So to avoid being vulnerable, you leave, either physically, you flee, or you emotionally just check out and shut down. And as you are doing this work, the journaling helps a lot. And you want to reinforce what you're doing with affirmations. You can speak them, you can write them. Affirmations, and I've talked about this before, change your brain chemistry. So things like, I am worthy of love and connection. I can break cycles and create my own story. These are very powerful ways to say your choices are now yours now that you understand the impact of family patterns. Another important thing that many of us skip over is seeking mentorship or help. Healing cannot be done in isolation. You need coaching, community, and therapy to help accelerate this transformation. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go quick, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so when you go far, that means you have really changed patterns. It wasn't a quick fix and you feel good in the moment, but then you go right back to it. So community, coaching, therapy, these are all very important. So I have so many stories from women who have been able to shift their family patterns, heal, and see changes in love and self worth. One woman that I worked with was the first in 3 generations to get and stay married. She had her children in wedlock. She came from a string of broken families due to family traumas as well as societal traumas, migrating to the north from the south, families being broke up due to racial trauma. So many societal factors influence these family patterns. And she had never seen an example of a healthy relationship where a woman didn't seem to be abused or have to just settle for any old man just to say she had someone. She was able to do that work through those steps, acknowledging it, identifying the patterns, acknowledging them, working on rewriting them. And she became very aware of the types of men that she began to attract. She looked at the men she used to attract, and then as she gained more self worth and did that inner work, she no longer had men in her DMs or coming up to her that she did not find attractive on any level. She began to attract people who wanted emotional connection, who were emotionally mature, and who were very different from the examples that she saw growing up. And it was a shift for her because she had to learn to be in the unfamiliar. In some ways, we cling to those patterns both unconsciously, but also because they feel familiar. So she had to sit with the discomfort of a healthy man, and it was very different for her. But it began to help her heal and see that she was worthy of a relationship that wasn't abusive or emotionally cold or distant. She was able to attract the love that she began to realize that she deserved. I invite you to reflect on which patterns you see repeating in your relationships and which ones are you ready to rewrite. And some patterns we have picked up have been healthy. So you want to acknowledge those as well. But if there's ones that you want to rewrite, write them down and begin being intentional about them. All right, so my favorite segment is Q&A. My first question is, how do I know if my relationship struggles are ancestral and generational or just personal? This is a great question because it's not always obvious. One clue is repetition. Do you notice the same patterns showing up in multiple relationships? For example, are you repeatedly attracting partners who are emotionally unavailable, critical, or distant? Another hint is if the dynamic mirrors what you experienced in your family growing up, even if you were not consciously aware of it. That doesn't mean it's your fault, it's usually inherited. A practical step is to reflect and journal. Write out the patterns, trace them back to your family experiences, and notice where your responses feel automatic versus intentional. Awareness is the first step to breaking the pattern and the cycle. I love that question. Question two, can I really heal if my family doesn't change? Whew, you absolutely can. Healing your ancestral loved wounds isn't dependent on anyone else changing. It's about the choices you begin to make for yourself. You can honor your family and still create different patterns in your own life. Think of it like this: you can't control the past, but you can control how you show up now. Through practices like boundary setting, inner child work, and conscious relationship choices, you can break cycles that seem to have gone on for generations, even if the older generation or other people are not on board. Great question. You guys are bringing it with these questions. Okay, question three is, how do I balance honoring my parents while choosing a different path? This is one of the most common challenges that I hear from women. The key is separating love from approval. You can honor your parents by acknowledging the struggles that they face, having empathy for them, understanding their limitations, the time that they came up in. But that doesn't mean you have to replicate their patterns. You can love them and still prioritize your own well being and emotional health. A helpful practice is to say to yourself, I honor your journey, but I choose my own path. This statement creates clarity, self respect, and freedom to rewrite your story. All right, the final question is, how long does it take to see real change in my love life? Yes, you guys are like, look, give me the details. The honest answer is that it varies. Some women notice subtle shifts almost immediately as soon as they identify. It's like feeling more confident or less reactive in relationships. Deeper change, such as breaking those long-standing communication patterns and attracting healthy, aligned partners, can take weeks or months of consistent work. The key is consistency and intentionality. Journaling, boundaries, inner child work, applying what you're learning. Remember, this is a process, it's a marathon and not a sprint. And all the small shifts start to compound. And one day you'll look up and be like, oh my gosh, I feel like a completely different woman. That's how it works. I talk about these techniques and more in my book, The Boundaries to Bliss Blueprint for Women Who Are Finally Ready to Win at Love. Listen, ladies, healing ancestral wounds is not just about fixing relationships, it's about reclaiming your life, your love, and your worth. If this episode resonated with you, I want to invite you to please take the next step for your own good in your own relationships. Grab my book, The Boundaries to Bliss Blueprint, where I walk you through actionable steps to reclaim your feminine energy and rewrite your love story. Or if you want something deeper, join the Boundaries to Bliss Society, my inner circle community where women just like you are sharing, healing, and transforming together. Remember, the patterns you break today will create generational freedom for yourself and for the future generations tomorrow. You are worthy, you are loved, and your story is yours to rewrite. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and I'll see you next time. I'm Dr. Nicole.